So I get things done because people get, they don't want me in their offices because I breathe down their necks. That's how I get things done. Just kidding, no. I'm honored to be here. Your very first inaugural meeting. It's great to see the turnout. It's, I think, a lot of excitement. And this is the kind of energy that's going to move the state forward. So very happy to be here. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Chetna. Thank you, Lindsay, for having me. And Brian Blatt and his team are a wonderful sales team. I was just talking with Audra about that. They're not the typical annoying salespeople. Did I say that out loud? Not all salespeople are that. So they're a great team. And again, this is a beautiful facility. I was here for the inauguration of this building under John Salazar, Commissioner John Salazar. It's a beautiful building, and I wanted to thank Rich Medina, who's helped secure this facility. I wish our Pearl Plaza was as beautiful as this, but we won't talk about that.
We talked about that this morning.
And again, want to thank Commissioner Don Brown, who's my counterpart on the cabinet. He's been a very innovative leader from what I heard, and I'm looking forward to working with him at the Department of Agriculture. So I was invited to dinner with Mark Benioff, the CEO of Salesforce, and I truly look up to him as a leader. Again, he gets things done. He is about innovation. He's about doing things, making things easy for the customers. So that's what Salesforce is about, right? So we collectively serve our citizens, the citizens of Colorado. And for us, it's not about creating technology roadblocks, but it's about simplifying their technology needs so that they can focus on their core competencies and make government services be accessible. That's the biggest thing from a technology perspective. So Salesforce is a great partner in that way because the ease of deployment of Salesforce is what, I was a big Oracle ERP person for the longest time. And converting from that to a Salesforce mind change was a big jump for me, but once I'm here, I think it's a solid transition now. And just a few examples, right? So 16 state agencies use Salesforce right now. And we have 42 applications already programmed and ready to go. And we have, as we speak, applications being developed, which shows the kind of breadth and depth of Salesforce in the state agencies. For me, the biggest project that I was excited to see was the CDOT Aeronautics project, where it was a complete Salesforce platform, and it's a one-stop shop. And again, it's that kind of robustness that Salesforce brings that's needed for the applications and the agencies that we support, and they love that, right? It's configurable. It's not 6 weeks of configuration and 4 weeks of testing and 10 weeks of something. It's truly that configuration capability. So I think it's a great ease of application that's very attractive to a lot of agencies. And for us, because this is a collaboration between the state, local, and other entities in the public sector, I think that's very important to have that kind of collaboration because we need to leverage each other. We need to leverage each other's resources because with collaboration comes great results and outcomes. And we can move the state forward and all those projects forward. So again, I wish this team all the very best. I think there's going to be some amazing thoughts and ideas that are going to come out of this, and I wish you all the very best. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
But I will let you know, I'm a business process manager with the Governor's Office of Information Technology, so we're the state's IT service provider. A business process manager, basically, I'm the one that goes in and says, okay, well, you have the technology, you bought the solution, but as we know in public sector and the private sector knows as well, that's only just one part of the entire solution. So you can throw technology at a problem all you want, but if there's not people and process behind it, you're not going to get very far. So one of the things that we found and we've implemented at the state level is a center of excellence. And so today I'm just going to kind of describe how we kind of came to that decision and how we've modeled the Salesforce program at the state. Next slide. So about this time last year, we knew that the state had a significant investment in Salesforce, not necessarily within OIT, but at the individual agencies and offices. And so when we determined that we were going to make Salesforce an enterprise solution, we figured, okay, well, we have the technology, but now we need to put our arms around the process. How do we manage this? So the problem is how do we at OIT, as the state's IT service provider, provide enterprise-level support to a solution that A, is already in production across 16 different agencies and offices, B, implemented by several different vendors with very little regard to standards and design patterns, implementation, training, documentation, and C, exists in one-off instances across 27 siloed orgs, while at the same time leveraging customer input, experience, and feedback on what they want from their IT service provider. So taking that as a challenge, I mean, it was quite a hefty thing. So what we said is, okay, let's build this as a program. We're going to consolidate governance, processes, and standards of all Salesforce-related services in one program. And that program consists of a program team, which addresses strategy and policy, a center of excellence, which addresses governance and standards, and then 2 communities of practice to address shared knowledge and best practices. Next slide. So this is what the model, I'm a visual person, so this is kind of what the model looks like. At the very top, we have our program team, and our program team consists of 8 folks within OIT that have a vested interest in the actual platform itself. So we're the ones that are actually going out and kind of formulating the strategy and policy and working with the ELT and our various functional groups to figure out, okay, what's the direction that we need to go in. At the next level, we have our Center of Excellence. So the Center of Excellence just kicked off last month, so it's still in its infancy. And within the Center of Excellence, we decided to frame kind of our processes and deliverables that we would address around 5 different areas. Those 5 different areas are business and communication, development and architecture, support, release, and change management, adoption and training, and security. Within the Center of Excellence, then, we've actually been able to prioritize, because let me back up just a little bit. When the program team, we worked with a Salesforce success rep last fall, and we developed a list of processes and deliverables that we needed to address at the state level in order to support this much better. This list slowly grew. We were like, oh, we just need to address support and training and 5 other things. And this list grew and grew and grew. Next thing we know, it's about, 100 line items. So of things that 8 people were trying to address. So we said, okay, we need to get a handle on this. So, how do you eat the elephant? One bite at a time. So within the Center of Excellence, the program team said, okay, here are our top, I think it was 10 priorities that these are the foundations for everything else at the state that we need to do. And from there, the Center of Excellence voted and said, okay, well, we're going to pick the top 3 and start knocking these out. So we formed working groups around these top 3. So last month, we voted on change management, design standards, and the OIT website. Our OIT Salesforce website, excuse me. So those are our top 3 priorities. And within 1 month, our change management has already gone into effect into the OIT change management policy. Our OIT website, we've already met. We've developed a plan of action. It's going to be live for our customers, both internal and citizens of Colorado, on 1 July. And our design standards, they've already kicked it off, and they're planning on getting naming conventions done by the end of June. I mean, that's pretty impressive, not just for government work, but I mean, in total, I'm very excited about that. So at the very bottom, then, this is the foundation. I've been building centers of excellence at OIT for the last 1.5 years, and one of the things that we found is really a grassroots approach is kind of one of the best approach to go out there and figure out, okay, how do we manage this? How are people really using it? Because the grassroots, those are the folks that are on this and supporting it and developing on it. They're the ones that are supporting the citizens on it. And so what we wanted to do is form a community of practice. A community of practice is basically a group that's open to anyone and everyone, and they're coming together to share knowledge, share learning experiences, talk about how they're using it within their own agencies or offices. And so right now, we were finding that a lot of agencies, including OIT, we just didn't have the funding to go out there and purchase, massive amounts of Salesforce training for everyone. That would be ideal and get everybody spun up and everybody certified. But we just don't, it's not feasible. We don't have the money. So the next best approach was to say, okay, well, what can we do? We have some people that are very robust on the platform, and they have quite a bit of knowledge. At the agency level, we have administrators out there that are already certified. From a developer's perspective, we have developers that had been supporting some of these applications, whether officially or unofficially, for the last few years. And so why don't we take those folks and learn from them and access their knowledge and let them kind of help grow everybody else. So that's where that comes from. Our communities of practice is something that we're going to be kicking off next month. We have two different groups. One is for application developers. And the only reason why I'm putting a quote around developers, not because they're not real developers, it's because a community of practice is open to everybody. We send out a mass communication. It's come one, come all. If you have a passion and an interest around Salesforce, we want you to be there. We had to call it something. So we focused on developers because it's going to tend to focus more on the technical side. But again, business analysts, project managers, anybody who has that interest and passion is welcome to join. The other one that we have is going to be the application super user. So if you're not familiar with ITIL terminology, that's where that comes from. And so a super user, according to ITIL, is basically the agency users, the folks they're not OIT, they're not IT folks, they're in the agencies, but they're the ones administering these applications. They know the business. They know their application. They were there for the implementation. So why wouldn't we want to leverage that knowledge? We can learn from them, and they can learn from us. So with that application super user group, the idea when I went out and I spoke to the agency users last summer, a lot of the feedback was, well, we want a forum where we can come together and we can talk just even internally about how we're using it across the state. And so with the application super user group, that's going to be centered more on the system administrator side. So, but again, it's going to be open to all state employees, come one, come all. So how did we get to this beautiful triangle? Thank you very much. First and foremost, we went out to the customers. We started there. And when I say customers, from an OIT perspective, we're talking about actual state employees, our state users, not necessarily Coloradans. So we went out to the customers and we asked them, okay, what are you using Salesforce for? Number one, hint, it's not just CRM. They're using it for quite a few different things. Number two, why Salesforce, quite honestly? Why Salesforce as opposed to other platforms? What made you get to that decision? On top of that, how did your implementation go? So that some implementations went well, some implementations didn't. And so we took all of that knowledge, including the final piece, which was, well, how can OIT serve you? You are our customers. We are here. We exist for you. How can we serve you? And when it came down to it, the top three things that the agency and office customers were saying was that we need help, support around training for our internal users. We need actual service support for break-fix solutions and enhancements. And then finally, we need help with project implementations and consulting, specifically around UAT. So a lot of times what was happening is that these projects were being built by our vendor partners, and then when it came time for UAT, unless you already had a pretty robust knowledge of the platform or the application, you don't know what you don't know. So when you go down and say, okay, well, let's go through this testing, sure, looks good to me. Well, I don't know. Suddenly 2 weeks later, it breaks, and you're like, oh, I just signed off on it. So this is one of those things where we said, okay, well, OIT, what we can do is we can have our developers get involved. Ideally, they do know what those little nuances are, what to look for, and they can really help with that project process. So once we decided, we went out to the customers, and that was basically the foundation for this entire program. We took that feedback and met with a Salesforce success resource manager. Did I get that right, Brian? So, who came out from the East Coast, and she worked with us for a week, and we sat down for 8 straight hours for 5 days and hammered this out. And so we said, okay, so what are the things that we need to address first? What do we need to identify? Another part of that was, and this is something, again, it's a process issue across the board. You can put in processes, but then if you don't assign accountability or responsibility, again, that process goes out the window. So the next phase for us was to say, okay, who is accountable for this process? Ultimately, the buck stops there. We need someone to be able to say, when all things fail, I'm responsible, I will start making things work, and I will take responsibility to start fixing it. So with the program team, ultimately, when it comes to the Salesforce program and the policies and the standards and how we govern, ultimately that accountability falls on the program team. From there, within the Center of Excellence, that's where responsibility falls. So responsibility is going to be, the Center of Excellence folks are the ones that are going to be out there that are helping drive developing these standards. They're going to be the ones that help us go out and govern these standards. And then finally, with the communities of practice, those are the ones that they're informed and they're consulted. So we go out there and we talk to, again, the folks that are out there on the ground, boots on the ground, working in these applications, and we're keeping them informed of what we're doing, and we're in turn asking them for their opinions and how are they using it, what can we do better. All right, next slide. So right here, I just kind of outlined briefly as far as how we kind of broke down the work. And so I just want to highlight with the program team, besides the policy and strategy that I had already mentioned, they're going to be responsible for data management strategy and managing the enterprise org strategy. So again, like I said at the very beginning of the slide, initially we have 27 siloed orgs across the state. As part of the program, we went and procured with Salesforce an enterprise license agreement. Under this enterprise license agreement, we were able to procure a bulk set of licenses and a bulk set of orgs that OIT can manage internally. The idea is that for all new builds, if this is a good fit to build within the SOC Gov org, it's highly recommended. And the only reason why is that, number one, there's cost savings. Clearly, you'll be able to kind of figure that out. But then number two, we can support you a lot better. We can go into your application. It starts to become a little bit more regimented as we're building and bringing on these new applications. And not only supporting, but quite honestly, project implementation. That has been a major pain point across the state for the last couple of years. We want to build these projects, but then they take a year and a half to implement. Well, this is technology. By the time it's implemented, that technology is irrelevant. So Salesforce, and that's why, quite honestly, and I'm not saying OIT, I'm just saying Lindsay Baker, that's why Lindsay Baker loves Salesforce, because it does allow us to stay flexible. It does allow us to stay innovative. And what we can do with these projects is, as we start building multiple projects in the SOC Gov org, we can just start leveraging those same applications over and over again. We can start using design standards, templates over and over again. And the idea is that over time, that project life cycle can go from, say, 8 to 12 weeks, which is still probably long for a Salesforce application build, to down to like 6 weeks. Boom, you're up and running, and you're able to support your citizens, you're able to support your customers, and so that SOC Gov org allows us to do that. As far as the COE, besides the COE providing bidirectional communication and collaboration across our portfolios and our functional groups, so it consists of not only folks from enterprise applications, but we have people from the customer office, we have people from access control, we have people from security, we have people from enterprise architecture. So we're able to, again, kind of keeping that grassroots mentality, instead of kind of waiting for all the information to funnel up to the management level and then funnel back down. We just kind of do it at our level and cross-coordinate, and then we send our communication back up and down to our managers. And then finally, for the COE, they're able to provide consulting services to businesses regarding future needs and opportunities, as well as consulting services during project intake and project lifecycle. So as of 1 July, the idea is that once the business, so the customer at the agency says, you know, I want this type of solution. This is what I'm looking to do. They talk to their IT contacts, which are, whether it's an IT director or an IT portfolio manager, and they say, okay, here's what we want to do. They go through the assessment process. During that assessment process, what we are finding is there's this gap where the IT folks who are trying to assess, okay, well, what solution should we use? The agency, of course, wants to know not only what solution is best, but generally, can you give us a rough estimate how much it's going to cost? How long is it going to take to build? How many hours, man hours is it going to take? What kind of resources do we need? And so it became kind of a chicken or the egg conundrum where the agencies wanted to know is this the right solution? Well, we can't make a decision until we know all these resources. Where then on this side, they said, well, we can't tell you the resources until we know about funding. And it became a very circular process. And so the idea is now, during the assessment phase, they can come to the Center of Excellence and then say, hey, we're looking to do this kind of project. And then based off of our previous experiences, because we have purview of not just your agency or not just your office or not just your division, we have a purview across the entire state. We can say, you know what, based on past experience, we can give you a general estimate. And that way they're able to go back to the businesses and say, okay, based on this, do you think Salesforce is worth it? You know, is this the right solution? They say yes, and now it can go to procurement. So it really kind of speeds up that process. And then throughout the entire project, we have a Salesforce developer within OIT that's going to be attached to that project. And during the entire project lifecycle, that developer can turn to the COE and say, okay, we're getting ready to put in certain custom objects. Do we have templates for that? Do we have standards for that? And so as we kind of continue to build in this SOC.gov org, we're able to leverage that and, again, decrease your time to production. And then finally, at the bottom, we have communities practice. What do they provide? So I've kind of already highlighted best practices. But the other thing is that it's a conduit between OIT and the agency. Again, this is not to say anything against the very high-level managers. It's just and we've discovered that a grassroots approach to communication is the most effective. And so, quite honestly, it's easier for me to go and talk straight to Peg, and we can just talk Salesforce. And I feel like we are able to be a lot more productive from that perspective, and then we can go back into our individual agencies and push that information, push the requests up the chain as needed. So that's kind of where this community of practice really bridges that gap. And then finally, there's a level of mentorship and education and training. So again, while we can't necessarily afford to send everybody out for certification, we can bring in those folks that are further along in their knowledge track and ask them to teach courses for us. So again, it's a way that we can make sure everybody is spun up. We want to provide a community to everybody that's out there. So, and this was kind of the best way to do it. Next slide. So I would say probably 80–90% of you in here are already state government users. So you will be receiving some communication here in the next month and a half about some of the things I just talked about. For those of you who are not at the state level, if you're interested in one of these concepts at your office, division, or agency, whether it's a community of practice or a center of excellence, let me know, and we can talk one-on-one. And I've helped some other customers in the past when they were looking to set up a community of practice, and I can help get you started. There's no pride in ownership, so I've got a lot of templates out there. I've got a lot of information, so I can just package it up nice and neat for you and hand it off. So are there any questions about this at this time? No? Okay. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Gosh, I'm feeling all mortified over that. So this is Audrey Garcia, and Audrey is my system administrator. I had a system administrator that got himself certified and then went off to do Salesforce tech in the tech world. And Audrey was his backup, and so she's not quite certified yet. But she's been part of this project as we've built, and So she'll have some input too, and she'll keep me on track in case I forget to tell you guys anything. So we can go to the next slide. I just wanted to give you just a brief understanding of what it is that we do. So I manage the Adult Protective Services Program. It's kind of similar to child welfare, but it's for adults with severe disabilities and vulnerabilities who are being abused, sexually abused, physically abused, caretaker neglect, exploitation. So we take reports from mandated reporters and from others in the community that suspect that this young man in his 20s with a severe developmental disability is being neglected, or the elderly 90-year-old with dementia is being ripped off by his kids and grandkids. We take the report, we're then mandated to do an investigation. Sometimes we work with law enforcement to do that investigation. And then we have to assess the client's overall needs. So we look at things around their environment. Do they have working plumbing? Do they have a furnace that works? Do they have access to their funds, or is somebody stealing from them? Can they do their basic activities of daily living? Bathing, showering, cooking, cleaning. So we look at that whole package, and then our job is to take services that are available in the community and help support them, stop the abuse, and make sure it doesn't happen in the future. So that's kind of our role. And so the system that we needed to create was one that could collect data on the kinds of reports we're getting and our clients that we were serving, but also had to be a case management system so that we could track the assessment, so we could track the services we put in place, the interviews we conducted, and the information we gathered from those interviews, who we talked to, when we talked to them. Essentially, think of it as a parallel criminal investigation, but our focus is on the person versus the crime, okay? So that's what we were trying to do. Throughout the United States, APS is a very underfunded program. There's no federal APS program, none. There's no federal APS funding. Every state sets their own rules. Every state does their own thing. We're all kind of similar, but it's also different. So finding a APS solution that's already been created that we could purchase, there were a couple options, but they were not very good options. And so when we went through the RFP process and we found Salesforce, it was kind of a slam dunk because we could build it ourselves and build it for what we needed. Next slide. So we ended up contracting with Verteba Inc. I don't know if anybody else has worked with Verteba, but love them. And we essentially built a custom system. We used some standard Salesforce objects, but we also created a lot of specialty items. And we did some things in the system that, as far as we're aware, no other state is doing. For example, next slide. So we created an intake form so that when a caller calls, sometimes they bounce all over the place and you can't get them to just say name of the client, address. So we use Visualforce to create a situation where we have different tabs to collect various information from the reporting party. There's not a save button until you get to the end. So you can bounce back and forth from tab to tab depending on how you can corral that reporter. And you don't have to say, oh, wait a minute, I gotta save before you can go on and tell me this next thing you're trying to tell me, right? We also created in this a system calculation. So based on, we have these yes/no questions here, like physical and medical and memory decision making. Based on the answers to those questions, the system generates a recommendation to the county to say, you need to screen this in and investigate, or this person doesn't meet eligibility, screen it out. Supervisor can always overrule it, but the system is generating a recommendation based on what we did in this system. Did I forget anything? No. Okay. Next slide. And so you can see the recommendation here. And we can also generate from the emergency or non-emergency situation a date that the county has to respond by. So the system generates and says, all right, this case is an emergency, you have 1 day, here's your deadline to respond. If you don't respond by this date, you're late. We can also do that with the 3-day response, and it calculates that for them. They have 3 working days, so it's their business days. So every single county can set up their business days in the system, and it'll calculate specifically for them. We've never been able to do that before. We also needed to create an assessment. So this is kind of the assessment that we created. This is also a visual force page. And this is where we're documenting those client strengths and needs, whether or not they can do their ADLs, whether or not they have access to their resources. So we look at all of these different areas. And if you go to the next screen, within each area is a number of individual risk factors. And these risk factors, there's about 75 of them. And we didn't want workers to have to select 75 answers, because oftentimes, if you have a person that you're serving who has a lot of physical disabilities, they're going to have a significant impact on every area in here. And so at the top, the check all, they can select significant impact and it will self-populate all the way down. And then they can make individual changes. So if they have a significant impact on most, but no impact on a couple, they can go in and then individually change those. So it created some efficiencies for the worker. And then you can see on the right side is a checkbox for a mitigating service. So what we want to do is we want to look at risk and we want to look at safety. And at this point, we don't know of any other state that looks at both risk and safety. And they're different because a client who has ambulation problems can't walk. They are always going to have a significant risk in that area because they're never going to walk again. But if they have a wheelchair and they have a mitigating service, they have a safety, right? So you have risk versus safety. And so what we want to do is we set this up so the system is actually calculating for us a risk score and a safety score at the time that APS starts their investigation. Then, when we're done with the investigation and we're done implementing services, they do another assessment. And that gives us a new score for risk and safety, so we can see how much we reduce risk and how much we improve safety. So we can have a quantitative measure of APS intervention. Never been done. We don't know of any state that's doing that. So Salesforce let us do this. None of the other programs that were out there let us do that. We're working on getting this validated. So we've identified a professor at the University of Denver, and they are going to be working on making sure that this is a scientifically valid tool, and we'll make changes to the tool once she does her study. We'll validate it again, and then we will be able to publish this across the nation. Yay! Next slide. So here's just kind of what it looks like when you're done, and it shows whether you have a minor or a significant impact, gives you your score. We set it up so that each individual section that we're working with has a score, so we can look and see, are we able to resolve risk better in one area than another? For instance, it may be really easy to reduce risk in environmental because you can clean up the bed bugs, you can clean up the hoarding, you can get a furnace. But in the area of cognition, if you have somebody with a developmental disability, if you have someone with dementia, those things generally don't get better. And so we'll be able to do some real data analysis around that when we get more data. And next slide. The system also then calculates the difference when you're done with the 2 assessments, so we have that quantitative measure as well. Next slide. So this is just some of the other things. These are kind of the standard Salesforce objects that are available that we've just kind of modified for our use. And next slide. We added this after we came live because we have certain time frames that APS caseworkers have to meet. Time to respond to an initial report, a time frame in which to complete their investigation and assessment and so on. And once we went live with this, for the first time we were really able to see what was happening out in the counties because we had such a terrible system before, we really had no transparency. And what we realized was counties were not doing the job very well in a lot of situations. So we created this so that the system now says what your due date is, and the workers can see this, and they can also see whether or not they were timely. And all of this is also built into their dashboards and reports to help them manage their caseload, give them reports through email to say, hey, you've got an action due on a case this week, don't forget. And what it's done is really help us start to improve the quality of the casework that we're seeing. Next slide. So we set up multiple different profiles for different workers that do this job. Some are screeners, they only have access to intake because all they do is take the report. We've got case aides that can do a little bit, but not everything. And so we've been able to limit who can see what, who can do what. The Salesforce recently released this process builder. I think it was in the January release. We have a profile called Enhanced Supervision. It's for very new caseworkers or for caseworkers who are having some performance issues. And what it does is it does not allow them to complete and finalize things like the investigation, the assessment, the case plan, or close a case without a supervisor reviewing it and approving it. So it gives that extra level of supervision. The way that we had to set it up really didn't work because what would happen is we had to have a button that the caseworker had to push to submit it for approval. Well, if you got a caseworker that's just not wanting to do what they're supposed to do, they could just go through and do the whole case and close it, no questions asked. The process builder now, we're going to be able to set up a workflow so that as they complete processes, it actually locks the case and they can't work on that case at all. It locks it, will automatically send it to the supervisor, and until that supervisor unlocks that case, they're dead in the water, which is what we want. Next slide. We also built a case review tool using Conga. Any of you guys use Conga? Okay. So this was something we didn't know about when we started designing. This is one of the things that I talked to Lindsay about last year was we knew so little about Salesforce. We're program people. We're not IT people. And so we learned about Conga from Verteba because we said, we really need a report where we can easily read case notes. And they said, oh, get Conga, get Conga. And so this was one of the lessons learned because we didn't budget for the Conga licenses that you have to have, right? So, but it's great because our windows are kind of all over the place. And what we've done is create a report with the Conga license that does kind of a mail merge. into a Word document, puts everything in chronological order from the report to case close, so you can easily read through and audit that case. We created an Excel spreadsheet through Conga as well that helps us score that, so we can do formal audits on these cases and actually give a quantitative score to that worker. The reports and dashboards, like I said, we set up different reports and dashboards for caseworkers than for supervisors than for state. So supervisors can keep an eye on what caseworkers are doing. Caseworkers can only keep an eye on what they're doing. We can keep an eye on everybody. It's mobile friendly. Caseworkers are out in the field a lot, and so everything that we do in CAPS can be accessed through a smartphone or from a tablet. Lots of counties, since we've gone to CAPS, have gotten tablets and are starting to use that. That improves documentation because they don't forget what they just did. They can leave that home, go out to their car, enter their notes, and they're done. We set up email notifications directly from CAPS. We really like that because it can be automated and we don't have to do it. It was kind of a one-time thing, and my little group of one doesn't have to do that. Next slide. We also set up specialized modules. So aside from the case management and the reporting piece, we did things that we need to also do. So we set up a CAPS support module so they can put their help desk tickets in right through CAPS. They come directly to us. They have to have continuing education every year, so we have a module for them to track that. They're required to have a multidisciplinary team to kind of help staff cases in their community. We can track that. We've put up a documents area where we put up training materials, so they always have access to all of our training materials. Case reviews, we can track all the case reviews that are being done. The chatter feed we use to scan and upload all the evidence we collect, medical reports, photos of injuries, bank statements to track financial exploitation. Next one. And then we set up specialized modules just for us to track our projects and tasks that we want to do, any county and community contact we have. We get a lot of perpetrators that call who are very, very angry that the county has taken away their power. So we're able to track that because they often complain to the governor. We have to report back to the governor. And then because I think we were a Salesforce system, and the feds, when they're creating for the first time a data reporting system for adult protection, so for the first time in history to collect data from different states on their APS programs, about 30 states met with them, and when I mentioned that we had a new system on Salesforce, there were about 15 tech guys from the feds that just sat up like prairie dogs and said, "Whoa, really? That's really exciting." And so we volunteered, along with 20 other states, to pilot test this system and build the interface between the two systems. And we were one of 5 states selected, and we just completed that task. Found some big gaps in the federal system because they were only allowing 15 digits for an encrypted field, and Salesforce minimum encryption is 128 characters. And so we had a lot of gymnastics to do with that, but we taught the feds some things too, which was great. All right, lessons learned, and I'm going to have Audrey help chime in on here. We got an ongoing support and maintenance package with Verteba, and we also got, in our budget request, we were able to get about $55,000 a year to continue to make enhancements and improvements to the system, because there's still a lot more we want to do. So if you're looking at a new project, I would strongly suggest that you get some money built in for those complex improvements to your system. Ask at least for 1 FTE to help maintain your system, because we didn't do that, and it cost us a program person. So we are just that much more busy on the program side because Audrey is now doing nothing but CAP support. We love forms assembly. This was another project we didn't know about until Vertiba said, hey, do you know we can create an internet form that'll download into CAPS? And so we had them build that, and it's essentially a mirror of our intake report. And we're doing a slow release. We're just opening it up to people that make reports on a regular basis, like law enforcement and hospitals, to see how that works. But eventually we want that to be a 24/7 reporting tool for the general public. So they can go on any website, find that tool, enter a report at any time of the day. It downloads directly into CAPS, sends an email to the supervisor and says, you've got a new report. We've had some trouble with duplicate contacts. I don't know if you guys do contacts, but we've been really struggling with that in how to manage all the duplicate contacts. And so that's something that support from other Salesforce users would be really handy in how to manage that problem. Licenses, when everybody got word that we had created such a great system, especially the child welfare workers who also do this, and they're in a very antiquated system, they all begged, please, please, please create a CAPS for trails. But when we looked at the counties and we said, tell us who your APS staff are so we know how many licenses to buy. And they told us, and so we planned for 250 people. And then when CAPS came out and they saw it, all of a sudden the counties had over 400 people that they wanted access. And so we've had a running battle with saying, you know, only APS staff get in here. And so plan your licenses ahead well. We did not create a data environment outside of CAPS. And I'm kind of regretting that now, I think because we have data analysts at the county and county directors that want to be able to pull their own reports. We don't want people that are not APS workers in our system because we have really sensitive information in there about adults. Horrific cases of abuse and neglect, lots of HIPAA medical records, and so we're trying to be very cautious about who has access. And so giving them a license into the whole system is just not an option. And so if you have a system like that that you're thinking about, also think about an external reporting module or system or data environment so that when you have people that really shouldn't be in the cases but need some aggregate data, there's a way to get that for them. And real-time data in Salesforce, for us it's been a double-edged sword. We love up to the second data, but what we're having trouble getting people to understand is that if we run a report at 9 a.m. and they run the same report at 12 noon, the data is going to be different because workers are in there for 3 hours updating information. And that's been a real hard concept for some people to grasp. And so doing a lot of education up front about that is something that I would recommend. And then Audrey, you have some other things.
A couple of the things that we learned too that were very beneficial was piloting. So we did piloting before. We kind of rolled out the system to just select counties and they tested. And that was really helpful because then we were able to see the issues up front that they were having before we even rolled out live to everybody. So that was really helpful. So if you haven't rolled out yet, that we strongly suggest. What was the other one? We had a lot of data from our old system. We had CBMS, and so we had to have that case information in CAPS when we rolled out. So the way we did it was we had them pull in manually, but Salesforce was so awesome that they were able to create a way that those particular cases coming from CBMS could be put into CAPS and not require all the other data that was required up front for our new cases. So it was able to be kind of customized for those cases. But having some kind of plan and way to bring in your data from CBMS or for whatever system or data you're using now to into your new system would be very helpful. Be sure you plan ahead for that.
Right, because what we did not do is we did not import data from CBMS. We hate the data in CBMS. It was just, it was bad. But we needed those cases that were carrying over from June 30th to July 1 when we went live. And so they would need to create a new case in CAPS. And instead of having this long process to do the whole intake and all of that, we created that shortcut for them. So it took them about 5 minutes to enter a new case and carry those over. So they were able to do it in a matter of a couple hours. It's great.
And what I do is I maintain the system on system admin. Like she was saying, Andy was our person before, and he was really into the system stuff, and he moved on to the IT world, and he loves Salesforce and got certified. So I was his backup. I did minimal things in the system, but now when he left, I took over. Salesforce to me is wonderful because I am not, or I would not consider myself an IT type of technical person. And yet, I haven't taken any of the courses yet for Salesforce, but I am able to go in and do lots of stuff. So, I mean, in a good way, not anything bad, but I mean, that's how user-friendly it is, and using the success communities, the developer communities, all those things have helped me. If I'm having trouble trying to figure out, formulas, then I can go in and say, hey guys, this formula isn't working for me, what do you suggest? And boom, I have a ton of suggestions on there, and I go in and try that, and it works great. So that's been really helpful. So if I can do that now with such a great, easy to use system, I can't even imagine what I can do after I take the classes. So I think that's all I had. I just spend most of my time taking tickets and stuff. Problems, issues, creating things, changing. We have a lot of requests from users that say, hey, can you guys change this for us? This would work better. Can you move this field here? Can you add this text? So I'm able to go in and do that. And then along with being the help desk, then I'm very busy. So like Peg said, having someone for your FTE just for the system is very critical because trust me, it is, I am very busy with just the system alone. So,
Yep.
But that's all I have.
Yeah, we truly love this, and we took 2 weeks. We went across the state to train everybody in the last 2 weeks of June. They got a day and a half of training, and so we figured there's no way that's going to be enough, because when we had to move to CBMS, everything just like did the big crash and burn. It was just a horrendous rollout. And so what we did was the first week of July, we set up a webinar from 8 in the morning until 4 in the afternoon, and we took shifts. Everybody had a 2-hour shift on the webinar and the conference call, and we told people, you get a problem, just jump on the webinar, jump on the conference call, we'll help you out right then. And so we just figured we were going to be slammed. We got maybe a dozen calls in the morning on the first day because people forgot their access or their password and needed to reset, really simple things. And then it was crickets. It was like we were bored. You'd get 1 or 2 people an hour that would call, and they weren't even calling about CAPS. They were calling about some policy question because they knew we were on the webinar, so that was a way to get us. But they weren't having trouble with CAPS. So Salesforce has just been great. The users love it. They love that we can make changes right now if something's not working. It's been a really, really good tool, and we really love it.